So for you, a few seconds will have passed. For me, it has been an entire night. I did sleep though, don't worry. Basically, I ran some games, and the CPU was at times reaching 90. Well, it was averaging 90s under load, and then it once went up to 99, and I freaked out about that. So what I did was, let me show you over here. I installed TpFanControl, as you can see up at the top left here. It's on the smart mode. It's obviously helping me monitor the CPU temperatures, and then I also, as you can see on the right here, created a custom power plan through software called Throttlestop. And basically what I did was just tick this box, go down to power saver, and then it created a power saver plan in the power options, which is under the, you won't be able to see it because my head's there, but if you go over the battery icon and right click and then click power options, it brings up this. So I don't know whether you'll be able to hear this, you probably will. If I move it to balanced, you may hear the, let's close that as well. Normally when I move it back to balance, I think it's just because I opened Throttlestop it slightly changed it, but basically the CPU fan will ramp up as will the temperatures, and it's pretty stable at the moment. But so what I've been doing, I've also got an eGPU, you can see here, like a high performance setup that gets the clock speeds into sort of 3.5 to coming up to 3.6 gigahertz, but with the power saver on, it kind of throttles the CPU but keeps the temps down as well quite nicely at around 60. So it kind of hovers between 1.18 and 2.18 and doesn't really go over on the power saver setting, which is actually kind of ideal, because then when I'm just using it as a device, we don't get any ridiculous temperatures. But if I need to, I can ramp it up with the high power settings, and then the fan will kick in when it's needed. But I'm just going to leave it on power saver for now anyway, that's the point. I want to say thank you to people on Reddit. I can't mention them by name because the one who actually helped me deleted their comment, which was a bit frustrating in the context of not being able to say who it was, but they recommended various things because I made a little Reddit post about it. Also follow me on Reddit, TechDave YouTube I'm called. There'll be a link in the description. As you can see here, I've got DaVinci Resolve installed, and I'm basically just editing, or about to attempt to edit, the video thus far using this eGPU setup on the power saving setting. So I'm going to play around with that and come back with a bit of a review. I was going to film it, but I think that it'll just involve me just running sped up footage, and it's a lot to edit. So I'm just going to come back and kind of give you a performance review once I've actually done some editing. So see you there. Oh, the other thing I forgot to mention, which I probably should have, is, I don't know because I can't remember exactly what was in the footage, but I now have my 8 gig Radeon RX XFX Radeon RX 480 850 watt power supply plugged in via express card, because I managed to fix my eGPU, which was cool, my original one. So even though the one I ordered in the post hasn't arrived, I've still got a working eGPU. So that's how I'm able to edit. I'm only doing, I think, 1080p 30 frames per second, and some of it's even 720p footage, as you can probably tell from the resolution. So in theory it should handle this like it's a breeze. The rendering times I'm not sure about, so what I might do is edit in the power saving mode, and then render in the eGPU power setting or the balance setting, so that we get shorter render times but more stable performance during the editing process. Just thought I'd mention that before we move on. Just a quick update again. I switched to power saver because I was getting just a little bit of a delay, so I'm just doing a comparison. Hello there, I'm TechDave, and I'm back sooner than expected of the speed of the device. So I don't know whether you can hear that that's actually the CPU and GPU fans together. They're quite loud, but the CPU is still at a nice cool 61 degrees, even under the load of running DaVinci Resolve. So I'm going to edit at the balanced, and I'm going to try rendering twice, once on the eGPU high performance setting and once on balanced, and then I might do a third one on power saver to see it, to compare, just so you can see what sort of situation you're in if you were to actually use this for rendering and editing. Bear in mind it's only, I think, 1080p footage at 30 frames per second, so it shouldn't be a challenge. You could in theory edit it on just the T430 if you had the integrated GPU, but I don't, so this is the most viable option. So report back soon. So far so good. Basically I've done I've put in 4 clips, and so I put it on the balanced mode. The CPU is hovering around 61 degrees, so that's really good. I think it may have bedded in nicely, like settled in to a more comfortable temperature as well, through the course of the night and through my testing. I don't know if that's normal, but that is kind of my experience of it. Also, the CPU clock speed is staying nice and low unless it's actually needed, so that's really cool. But yeah, it's more or less, I mean, there's a slight difference, but it's more or less performs like my desktop performs. But my desktop is, was it a 3.7 gigahertz quad core, so I'm kind of impressed really with the performance of it so far, but I'm only editing 1080p footage, so again, your miles may vary, but so far so good. So what I've done is to basically edit the first 17 sections of this video, which is totaling 34 minutes. So definitely you'll be seeing this in part 2, I would imagine, but I've just edited now here easily, really, like, had no trouble on the balance mode at all. I probably could have done even better had I used the performance mode, but I didn't get any throttling at all, and the CPU hovered at exactly 61 degrees, 62, 63 maybe occasionally throughout the entire process. So I'm going to set it rendering, and then I'm going to be back to show you the render time. So I don't know whether you can see in the top right corner there, I have started rendering. It is a 34-minute video. It is at 1080p, only 30 frames per second, but it is, the CPU fan has just kicked in, the GPU fan has just kicked in. I don't know if you can see that in the video, so I'll just demonstrate. So the CPU fan is quite loud, the GPU fans are going because we're rendering, obviously. But yeah, as you can see, 34-minute video, 48 seconds. I'm rendering it to an SSD, but all the files are on a hard drive, so that's a potential bottleneck there, because the video files are coming from a hard drive. Could be a little bit faster, but we're looking at 50 minutes for a 34-minute video using a laptop and an eGPU. So that I'm very pleased with, and it's already 2% through it, and the time is decreasing second by second. So it's not quite real time like I would get with my desktop with this GPU, but you're looking at adding about an extra 8 to 10 minutes, maybe 12 minutes on top of the actual length of the video. And as you can see from the footage that you're seeing on screen, it's rendering pretty bloody fast, so I'm very happy with that. I'll be back shortly. One last thing, so we're into the rendering process, and it's looking like it's, you won't be able to see it on screen because my face is in the way. In fact, I suppose I could just do this, but if I bring up this, you can see we're hovering at speed of the fan 5347 RPM. We're hovering at 83 degrees and stable, which is, we're even down to 80 now, so that's not too bad. and I'm quite pleased with that. It means it's in like a safe operating temperature. It's doing a heavy duty task. It's on balance mode, not the eGPU mode, which would be a high performance mode. It's unbalanced at the moment, and I'm really quite like pleased with it. We've still got 43 minutes on the clock. It's obviously been roughly 5-10 minutes since I started rendering it, but kind of impressed. Yeah, kind of impressed. So about 10-12 minutes in, we are eking into the 90s now, and I'm a bit concerned. It's not topping out, it's not crashing, but I'm a bit concerned about it putting too much stress on the CPU. So I might open Throttlestop now and move to power saver, which is going to impact the render time dramatically, but should take a bit of pressure off the CPU. That way you can see there on screen it says 91 degrees. And now we're down into the 80s, so I just thought in the interest of showing you what I'm doing, as I did say I would, yeah, we're now hovering down around in the 70s and 80s. Our render time is more or less the same, but I've throttled the CPU a bit just to protect it really. So yeah, but it doesn't appear to have changed the render time dramatically. And actually we just had it jump down a minute or two, I think, if I was paying attention there. I'll check the footage, but yeah, basically I've throttled the CPU again just to stop it capping over that 90 degrees, because the fan was going mad, and that should be fine, but I just didn't want to damage my CPU. So we're about a third of the way through the rendering process. It's capped out at about 75 degrees with the power saver on, and I'm really seeing the difference between the 4 cores, which is giving me an idea. I'm going to finish the whole video, and then you'll see this probably in sequence, but I'm just sort of saying what I'm going to do. I'm going to edit the whole video, render it, and then I'm going to do a render test of the whole video. So just literally rendering a pre-rendered video between the T430 and the T430S, like a race basically, to see which one renders better, because the T430S has an i7 dual core at 2.9 gigahertz. So I want to see, like, is there any real like improvement with the quad core, because it's not a perfect comparison, but it's actually not bad. It's like it's a dual core versus a quad core, rendering the same piece of footage with the same with the same settings in DaVinci Resolve, so with the same graphics card. So I'm going to basically compare dual core to quad core with it throttled down to the 2.8 gigahertz, the 2.18 gigahertz max speed, just to see, you know, is it a considerable upgrade with it throttled or not. So that will be later in the video. But yeah, we're about 35% through. We've got another half an hour remaining. It seems to be doing it flawlessly. Temperature's hovering, well, stuck to 75 degrees, so that's quite nice. So I'm not too worried about it overheating now, so that's good. And yeah, so we'll have a render race basically at the end of the video. I'll either film them side by side or just show the thing on screen, so we'll see what I end up doing with that. But yeah, in theory, well, I've tried editing on the T430S down there that I'm recording on now before, and even the basic editing is not necessarily viable with the dual core. So, but we'll do a fair comparison between the two. So, see you later on in the video. So here we are. We have rendered in the glorious time of 48 minutes and 3 seconds, a 34-minute piece of footage. So that's about 14 minutes extra on top of the actual time, so not real-time rendering like I would get on my desktop, but still pretty good. Now it's at a frame rate of 30 frames per second, 1080p. So if my basic conclusion is, if you're going to do this, you want to throttle the CPU down for rendering using the power saving setup, and then when you're editing you put it on balance, for example, and then you've got the speed for editing but you're not overtaxing the CPU, and then render at the power saving setting, and then that kind of makes it quite viable. So I'm extremely pleased. I've got more to do. This is probably either the end of section 2 or there might be a little bit more actually, so we're going to do a render race. But yeah, I'm actually extremely impressed. I've never been able to edit video on a laptop with the eGPU. It's never really been viable, so I'm very, very pleased with this 48-minute render. Yeah. So we are beginning the render race. It's saying an hour and 15 minutes at the moment, and we're still on the T430 at the moment. I'm guessing that's going to come down, but it doesn't appear to be coming down dramatically. It's actually going up in time a little bit. And all I've done between this and the original render is what have I done? Yeah, I just I added the logo at the beginning and end of the video in the appropriate places. However, it is now rendering 1080p footage, whereas the original footage in the video I think was 720p, or yeah, 720p. So it will be slightly longer, but I'm just saying I've set up the render race. Now all there is left for me to do is install DaVinci Resolve on the T430S, which, as you can see, so we've got the T430 down here currently rendering, then we've got the T430S over there. Excuse me, got to install DaVinci Resolve, and then we're going to do see what the results of the render race are for this system. But it's about an hour and 12 minutes for a 34-minute clip at 1080p, 30 frames per second, but rendering 1080p footage. So it edited just as smoothly, but that's where we're at the moment. So I I didn't lose the footage, I've still got the footage, but it was all crackly and had loads of distortion on the audio. The basic gist is the T430, which is now over there as our recording device, managed the footage at 1080p, 30 frames per second, 1 hour, 11 minutes and 43 seconds, roughly speaking. I think it was exactly that actually. And that was rendering a 1080p 30 frames per second footage, whereas originally when I did the original editing that was 720p, but then I rendered it as 1080p, so then it was rendering 1080p footage, so that's why it took a bit longer. I was just setting up the eGPU with the T430S. I'm going to turn off factory reset. But yeah, basically we have got the eGPU up and running. I've got DaVinci Resolve installed. I'm just, for now, just getting the drivers updated to the correct versions, or the latest versions of the AMD drivers. And then I'm going to do the render test of exactly the same footage, edited in exactly the same way, at exactly the same frame rate. Now, in theory, I'm expecting the T430S to do a little bit better, because I did the rendering on the T430 with the CPU throttled, but I expect it to be comparable, vaguely comparable. But so we got more cores but less clock speed, and I don't know how that impacts DaVinci Resolve. Whereas on this one here that we're going to render it with in a minute, we've got less cores but higher clock speed. So time will tell, I guess. The other thing that happened is when I first tried to install these drivers, it made an inaccessible boot device, and I had to repair it. I don't quite know why that was, but it was something or other went AWOL or rogue in the driver setup process. So, and I did a factory reset as part of the install process. So I don't know whether that's relevant or interesting to you, but I didn't do it this time. I'm just going to restart and then I shall return. So yeah, I've got it all working with the T430S, and as you can see, here we are on the T430S. Now, in the interest of fairness, because I set this up, as you can see on screen, with an eGPU high performance plan, so I'm going to switch it to balanced, which should give a slightly more fair setting. I mean, there's also, I could in theory install the downclocking software Throttlestop, but that wouldn't really be adequate, so I'm going to put it on balanced for now. So we're going to open DaVinci Resolve. I'm just going to do some quick editing to get the clip prepared, and then I shall return with more information about it. So the editing on the T430S, I've just quickly knocked together an edit that's a carbon copy almost of what I did before on the T430. So on the T430S, we've got the exact same files lined up at the same resolution. Everything's all exactly the same. And I'm going to start it rendering. But I just want to say the editing itself was quite glitchy. It didn't really have the performance I needed for editing, and I noticed that straight away. It's looking like the render. So it was an hour and 11 minutes for the T430. And we're getting about an hour and a half up here. Now I've used the same files, the same frame rate, the same resolution, and I've rendered them both from SSD to SSD, so I made sure it was like identical, but it looks like we're adding about another 20-ish minutes on top of the performance of the T430 for rendering. But so the rendering is not actually that bad because it's GPU assisted and it's still an i7 with 4 cores. The editing didn't really perform quite as I'd have liked it to, and also the fact that I can turn off the throttling when I'm editing made a huge difference in the experience of editing, because even though I just did this like quite basic clip, I found that the editing process itself was quite glitchy. There's probably things you can do to get around it, primarily to do with using like dummy clips and stuff like that. There's probably ways you can make it usable basically, but you just have to spend a bit more time faffing around with DaVinci. But this is just identical as it was set up with the T430, so it's just to give a fair comparison. So looking about almost exactly an hour and a half. So I'm going to try and find something to do for an hour and a half. See you then. So we got about half an hour into the T430S as rendering the device, 40 minutes, maybe less, about half an hour, and my laptop blue screen of death. Yay! So evidently rendering on the T430S, even with an 8GB GPU, not a wise decision, so it would seem. But I don't entirely know what the issue was as to why it didn't work. But blue screen of death did take place. So I think we'll count that as an abject fail altogether for the T430S in terms of rendering. And I'm going to just say something, because I've been reviewing previous footage that I've recorded. It's going to be really long-winded for me to re-record everything that has got this issue, but you may have noticed there's some weird glitchy noises in terms of like radio frequencies being picked up. That's because I'm using a USB microphone there, and I can only apologise now. I know it's the second video, or at least the second half of the first video, but sorry, it bugs the crap out of me as well. I apologise, it's unprofessional. But yeah, what was I saying anyway? So the T430S blue screen of death, it said TDR video failure. So I'm going to count that as a total fail for the T430S, which does game, but does not, apparently, does not video edit or render very well at all. So there's a lesson learned there. So I'd say the quad-core upgrade, massive improvement in terms of video editing and video rendering. So I'm going to give that 2 thumbs up for that. Ding, 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 ding. So the last thing to do for this section of the video, I guess, is probably, once I've done all the editing, there'll be some gaming benchmarks. So I shall return with the T430, not the T430S, and some gaming benchmarks. So stick around to find out what we've benchmarked.